Hey, welcome back. It's pretty close to a 6-minute Dharma talk, and I know I'm going to come up with a different word than Dharma pretty soon. It's just a 6-minute talk about the advantages of meditation and this sort of introspective work that we do. Because it's a good question. Why should we waste our time every morning sitting with our eyes closed? If we were to video ourselves sitting in the chair and show it to a group of pragmatic scientists, they might say, wow, that person wastes their time measurably every day for 20 minutes doing nothing when they could be doing something productive. I think it's a valid question, but I think there's a valid answer why we do it. And the more we examine why meditation is beneficial, the more beneficial it becomes. So all this week, we've been kind of batting around the topic of what it means to be spiritual, which is another good question. I do like asking questions, because when you ask questions, answers come when we're open to it. So what does it mean to be spiritual? Well, I'm of the worldview that there's a spectrum, and at one end of the spectrum, there's being a material person, completely fixed and absorbed and believing in the material nature of reality. On the other end of the spectrum would be what we might call being a spiritual person. And what's the difference? Well, fundamentally, materialism is a point of view that's very logical, it's very practical, it's very pragmatic, and it's completely swept the planet over the last 3, 4, 5 centuries. And for good reason too, man. It's extremely effective and efficient to live in the realm of empiricism. Or as Pink Floyd said in one of their songs, all you touch and all you see is all your life will ever be. I mean, can we just dispense with the make-believe and the hocus pocus and the fairy tale stuff? Does that stuff really do us any good? Isn't it just sort of a blithering waste of time? Did hocus pocus and fairy tales help us to invent laser beams and microchips and silicon wafers and all the things that have really advanced us? Did it really help us in medicine? Hasn't superstition and hocus pocus really sort of retarded our progress for a long time? And then finally, we woke up to an ability to begin to measure the world in pragmatic ways with our own senses, and then come up with understandings that really allowed us to advance to new levels of sophistication. And when, once and for all, are we going to dispense with this ridiculous spirituality stuff that still so much of the world is habituated to? So yeah, I understand the argument. I really do. What might some answers be? Well, tune in tomorrow. Just kidding. I do have some thoughts on it. And the point of view that all the world is what we see and feel with our senses is an available point of view, but there is something beyond that. And it involves a developed sense of perception that a materially minded person doesn't, or usually isn't, all that interested in developing. We have an internal eye of perception that's available in a dormant or nascent fashion, but if it goes undeveloped or unused, then the world is largely a material affair. Now, since the material world loves their tools. They love the things that measure things. They love their microscopes. They love their macroscopes. They love their tools. Now, if you were to tell a material person that there's one tool that they have available to them, that's the most important tool that they could ever acquire, and upon acquiring it, it would change their entire life for the better, you'd think a material-minded person would find that to be the most fascinating thing that they could ever discover in their life. You could tell the material-minded person that there's a tool inside of them that, upon discovery, would make them realize that all of the material world, rather than being fixed and separate from themselves, is actually malleable or moldable to their own consciousness, to their own observation. Wow, what a tool that would be. To go your whole life and never discover that tool. In other words, to be a perfectly material person your whole life and never discover a tool inside of us that actually gave one access and power over the material world and help shape it and influence into what it is that you like and love and appreciate living in, that would be, well, that would almost be on the order of a tragedy to live in that world. But this internal tool, it has to be sought, it has to be utilized, it has to be practiced. There has to be painstaking years of development, just like with any material development. It takes years of painstaking development through search and research, hypothesis and experiment. This is what we do in meditation. Now, upon developing a spiritual sense of things and how your consciousness actually does shape reality and is actually the primary influencer of reality, then it becomes the greatest tool in your toolkit. But if you don't want it, you don't have to have it. And then you begin to move up this scale. I would call it up the scale from materialism to spirituality. And once you get about halfway between the worlds, between material and spiritual, you really can't live in both worlds at the same time. A double-minded person is of no use. So this becomes a very interesting place for those who are moving along this scale. The material world is no longer sufficient for you, and you're not quite fixed in the spiritual world yet. This is where you're sort of kicked about like a football, but it's only more motivation to develop our internal tool. How's those apples for you today? It's great to see you guys. Look forward to chatting with you tomorrow. And I hope I haven't answered a thing, but I hope I have stimulated many questions for you. See you.